Husband caught in a clandestine meeting with his ex inside a castle made of ice in Antarctica, and I'm going to tell it the way it fell out of my mouth onto the mess table that night because if I try to polish it, it'll start lying. I'm Lark 31, a field engineer at McMurdo who can coax heat out of grudges and make a diesel generator purr when it's thinking about quitting. And if you're already imagining me in a red parka with a wrench tucked like a pencil behind my ear, you're not wrong. That's how I look in the station Christmas photo where I'm smiling like the freeze can't get me. The thing about Antarctica is that it loves a secret. Everyone thinks it's blank and white, a page waiting to be written on. It's not. It's palimpsest, scratched and rewritten by wind and melt and men who think they're the first to arrive. You learn what the place is saying because your life depends on it, how the snow lies when it's hiding a crevasse, how the ice shelf complains when someone has been walking where they shouldn't. You listen or you get eaten by quiet. So I listened, and the quiet told me something was wrong with Rowan. He's my husband, at least that's the noun we packed down with us, simple and warm like the thermos we share. He's a data scientist attached to the drilling team, the kind of guy who talks to ice 'cause the way other people talk to toddlers, with patience and the sort of hope you want to see win. He was the one who convinced me to winter over this year. We'll make our own little world, he said in August, standing in our Boston kitchen while the window pretended to be interested in summer. No traffic, no errands, no noise. He meant just us and the work. I love the work. I wanted the us. 3 months in, the us began to feel like a radio I couldn't quite tune. He'd take long walks to clear his head after midnight, when the aurora is half embroidered across the sky like the seamstress got bored. He started keeping an extra set of gloves in his parka that weren't his size. He carried a small notebook with a cover like sea glass and didn't leave it on the table under a coffee ring the way he leaves everything else. And he smiled at his phone when the satellite link stitched our little island to the rest of the world for its defiant 5 minutes every afternoon. I am not jealous by default. Jealousy is a sport for warm latitudes. Down here, if you're going to spend that much energy, you might as well shovel. But the smile was new. The smile was 18 again. The smile made me think of May. You don't know May, but my body does. She and Rowan dated in grad school. She left for fieldwork in Svalbard and he left for a grant he would not shut up about, and they parted with those soft adult words about timing and all that mean this would be everything if we were braver. 2 years later I met him in a hardware store when he was arguing with a bolt like it owed him money. We were good together because I fixed what squeaked and he loved what whispered. That's our myth anyway. But myths have long shadows. When he told me last year that May had been assigned as a visiting research lead for the Antarctic summer, I put on my bravest laugh. Assuming she doesn't get diverted to the peninsula, she'll be around for 2 weeks. We might not even overlap, he said, skull innocent. I said, cool, and I sharpened the word until it made the right shape in the air. The day the rumor started, it was minus 24 degrees Celsius and the wind was eating anything that dared to stick out. I was down in the generator room with Thomas, swearing at a stubborn pipe. There's talk, he said, because he has the gossip gene the way other people have freckles. Of a thing out by Cape Evans. I snorted. A thing like a storm or a thing like a yeti? Like a palace, he said, delighted to be alive to say the word. A castle made of ice. Somebody sculpted it or something. Or it formed like that. People said they saw towers. Thomas lives to troll me, but he doesn't lie about ice. That's the kind of poetry it gets mad about. No one is building castles without my crew moving their heaters, I said, wiping grease off my wrist with a rag that used to be a t-shirt with a band name on it. He shrugged. Maybe no one asked permission. You know how field teams are when they think romance will help their hunches, he said, smiling over the word romance like a bartender polishing a glass. Who? I asked too fast. Dunno, he said, and then he did know. They said Rowan went out there late couple nights. He looked at me and the joke ended. I told myself a story about a data logger and a drift that needed babysitting. I told myself a story about a survey path and the compulsion all of us have here to walk until the edge says enough. Then I found the notebook. I wasn't snooping, not really. I was looking for chapstick because mine had gone to wherever small kindnesses go to die, and his parka pocket offered like a friend. The notebook slid into my palm like a fish that knew the river. Inside, only names and coordinates, constraints and time windows, elevations and wind tables. And then, on the last page, the only sentence he'd allowed to be as soft as he felt: "Don't make a cathedral out of it." Underneath, a second hand had written, "Too late." That handwriting kissed my spine with an icicle. I've only ever seen May's writing on a whiteboard, crooked and exuberant, equations falling off the edge like they trusted gravity to catch them. The sentence in the notebook had her speaker in it. I took a skidoo during night lunch when half the station is trying to be asleep and the other half is trying to remember if they are. I signed it out like I was borrowing sugar. I put on my parka and my fury. I left a note on the whiteboard: "Out to pipe 7B because you always leave a breadcrumb even if it's a lie." The stars were brutal. The wind had calmed, so the air tasted like metal and unsaid things. The snowmobiles complained differently when they pulled out after midnight. Mine purred, complicit, as I headed out past the flagged route where the world narrows into a suggestion and all you can hear is the thrum of your own insistence. Antarctica at night will teach you humility fast. The black is very specific. Your headlamp buys you a tunnel. Beyond it, the universe is having its own conversation, and you are the rudest eavesdropper. I followed the path like I'd learned it in a dream, down off the packed road, past the sastrugi that looked like frozen waves the wind forgot to sit on, across a patch of blue ice that felt like I was skimming a glass heart. My breath turned into a scarf that kept trying to choke me. I cut the engine when I saw it because everything else shut up. The rumor had undersold it. A structure rose out of the night like a thought you're not sure you can afford. It wasn't a castle in the storybook way, not turrets with flags, no. It was better. It was a keep made of wind and freeze, a wallwalk carved by melt that had changed its mind, towers where two pressure ridges had leaned into each other like they were tired of arguing. The aurora hung behind it like a shy curtain, green stitched with violet, and the shape of it did that thing to my chest that good engineering does. Oh. That was all. Just oh. And inside the gate, not a gate, a fracture pretending to be an invitation, I saw a lantern glow. Real lanterns, the kind we charge off the station grid. I heard voices the way you hear two people trying not to be a pair, too quiet, too attentive. "Rowan," I called, because I am not a creep. The echo came back a second later with my name smudged on it. "Lark," he said, and then softer, "Oh, Lark." I stepped into the broken doorway and felt the cold adjust to make room for me, which is how you know a space is yours to enter. It doesn't argue, it reorganizes. It was a room the size of our kitchen at home, crystalline and blue, the walls glowing as if someone had tore ice to remember daylight. He stood near the far wall, parka open, hat off like the place had asked him to be polite. And beside him, May, feared and inevitable, hair tucked under a black cap, cheeks raw with the kind of joy that owes someone. I don't know what I thought I would do, shout probably. Throw a lantern like I was auditioning for a myth. Instead I did the one thing Rowan has ever respected more than data. I took off my glove and touched the wall. It sang. Ice sings when it's under stress, a high shy note that you feel more than you hear. I have pressed my ear to glacier and felt their gossip. This one said, "Don't stay long." I said, "It's unstable because if you give me a moral, I will answer with physics." May smiled, and I hated that it warmed me. "It's breathing," she said. "The tide'll push under it soon." We timed it. We wouldn't have risked it if we thought it would collapse on our heads. She tipped her chin in greeting like I was a colleague arriving late to a seminar and not the woman who'd packed his long underwear. "Lark," she said. "I was hoping I'd meet you somewhere with fewer knives." "I left them in the kitchen," I said deadpan, because my mother raised me to be funny when murder is illegal. Rowan stepped forward and didn't touch me because he has learned that my shoulder translates love into forgiveness too easily. "I can explain," he said, doctoring the sentence with that little he does to his vowels when he's about to be honest enough to keep his credentials. "You can try," I said. He looked at the ceiling, which is a stall but also here an active witness. A row of air bubbles suspended a foot over us like punctuation. "We found it," he said. "It wasn't this big when we first came. A windstorm sculpted the leeward side last week, and then the thaw along the fracture line carved this passage. Look at it. I said. And we recorded the resonance, May jumped in, unable to help herself. It's changing with the stress loads, it's like a living seismograph. We pulled the audio into signal analysis and the pattern looks like the X you didn't think to mention, I said, and the echo snickered. She didn't flinch. She has always been an honest scientist. Like something I can't do without him, she said, and then to my face, without a weapon, not the loving. The math. It broke me a little, the relief of being told the most dangerous part first. I put my palm flat to the wall again and I felt the thin thread between my body and the ice, the way the cold takes your heat and tells you a story. The castle was the kind of miracle this place throws at you when it's in a mood, useless and necessary. And my husband had found a way to make it an instrument. And he'd brought a woman who knows the shape of him because her brain meets the world the way his does. Why didn't you tell me? I asked him quietly this time, because the walls were tired of us already. He blinked hard, not at tears, his not a crier, but at all the sentences in the world he couldn't prove. Because I wanted one thing that wasn't narrated, he said. Back at station, everything is commentary. Out here for a moment it was just the sound. And then I was a coward and I didn't know how to invite you into something that had already decided to be beautiful. He looked at May like an apology that couldn't divide itself properly. And because I knew you'd want to protect us from it, he said to me, with your engineering, with your caution, and I wanted to be rash once without filing the form. I don't file forms for fun, I said, more tired than angry, which is worse. I file them so none of us die because we thought the aurora meant yes. May nodded, solemn as a nun. I told him, she said. We set timers. We planned surrender. We came yesterday at low tide and left when the pitch changed. She pointed toward the opening where the wind had shifted. Listen. It's telling us to go. I listened. The note under the note, the one that makes animals look up, had flattened. The castle's breathing wasn't even anymore. The tide under the ice would shove along its belly soon, and the crack they'd celebrated would decide to be a door for water. Get your stuff, I said. You can worship the sound on the walk back. All three of us moved with that jittery efficiency of people who know the trick isn't to be brave but to be ordinary in a hurry. May bundled the recorder, and I scooped the lanterns because I want them back in our inventory. Rowan stood for a second too long and looked up again. I'm sorry, he said, to the ceiling, to the frequency, to the woman he'd asked and the woman he'd not involved. I'm sorry, he said to me. Not for hearing it. For not inviting me, I said. For not trusting me to hear it too. He nodded, relief and dread dancing in place. We got outside and the cold immediately resumed its role as chaperone. The aurora shifted into a curtain call. I'll take the skidoo back with May, I said. You run, because he loves to run even in this gale, like defiance is a kind of cardio. He laughed once, sharp like the air, and took off, his breath a ghost that couldn't commit. May climbed on behind me like a person who has had the experience of leaning on women before. We didn't talk for the first kilometer because engines and crunched resolutions are loud. Then she asked, into my shoulder, Do you hate me? I snorted frost. I don't have the calories, I said. Do you love him? I love the version of him that listens to the world like it's not a test, she said. Do you need that version to be yours? No, she said, and I believed her before I wanted to. I need the data. I need the sound. I needed him here for it. I don't need to take him home. She thumped my back with a glove to punctuate the kindness. I'm not a thief, she added, mild. I'm a scientist. I steal only from silence. Back at station, the wind introduced us to the door, and the warm hit my face like gossip. Rowan came in 5 minutes later, hat half off, head trying on heroism. I made us tea because I refused to have any significant conversation in this life with a dry mouth. We sat in the comms room where someone had left a puzzle half done and a note that said, Please do not help. He reached for my hand and then, catching himself, folded his own like a confession. We'll run it through the proper channels, he said, telling the room, telling me. We'll get permission, we'll place sensors, we'll put it on the schedule. I'll write the report. And I will tell them I used it before I earned the right. You'll tell them, I said. And you'll tell me. About the other things. The smiles into the sat phone windows. The notes. He nodded, cheeks wrecked by truth. It wasn't what you think, he said. It wasn't Buddy. It was worse, I said, and he didn't argue. It was secrets you thought were art. He put his forehead on my knuckles like a penitent. I'm learning, he said. Keep learning out loud, I said. We made a plan because that is how I pray. The castle was logged, photographed, flagged for hazard. The seismics team hiked out with us the next day and listened the way medics listen to hearts. The sound was still there, furious and alive. We put 2 sensors where May told us the stress would change. We stayed 40 minutes and then we obeyed the pitch that told us to go. Rowan wrote the memo nobody wants to write. He signed his name first. He put May's name second. He put mine third because I wanted my name in the geometry, not the romance. What happened to the castle? It did what beautiful, disobedient things do here. A storm came through with the kind of wind that erases opinions. The next week, we returned to a field of new light where the towers had been. The instrument we left read one long, low sigh before the line went into the calm that is after. May stood there and didn't cry. Rowan stood there and did. I stood there and put my hand on each of them like the balance I have learned to do with a wrench, left then right wherever the thread needs help to move. That night we sat at the mess with the others and didn't tell the good story because the good story was older than jokes. Something lovely, someone unfaithful, the ice smirking. We told the other good story instead. Wind sang, we recorded it, the castle bowed. People nodded the way you nod when the place has changed you enough that you can't afford cynicism the way you used to. Did my marriage survive? Survival here is not a binary. It learned a new pitch. We talk now like engineers around a fragile structure. No ornamental lies, no load-bearing emissions. I put rules on the whiteboard next to the inventory list. Don't worship in secret. Invite the other into awe. If a thing begins as ours, keep it ours even when the world wants to make a paper out of it. He added one. If Locke says the wall is singing trouble, leave. May stayed through the summer. We built a data set together that will outlast all of us. She sent a recording to a composer in Oslo who turned it into a string piece that made a cook from Christchurch cry into the gravy. When she left, she hugged me first and him second. You're both ridiculous, she said, the kindest diagnosis. Be ridiculous early next time. I kept the notebook. Not the one with coordinates, he needed that. The other one, a new one we started the week after, where we write down the miracles before they turn into secrets. The first entry is mine, Aurora above Hut Ridge like a silk mistake. The second is his, Locke's laugh at 2:11 when the kettle forgot what steam is. The third is ours, castle gone. Sound remains. If you're waiting for a moral, I can give you the dull kind and the useful kind. The dull kind, don't lie to your wife. The useful kind, if the world hands you a cathedral of ice and you are lucky enough to love someone who hears it too, bring her even if she'll make you wear a helmet. Invite each other to the part where awe and fear are playing tug-of-war with your good sense. Down here you learn that secrets kill in the dumbest ways. A sugar packet hoarded gets ants, a hole you dig and don't mark gets a boot. And if you are ever standing in a room made of blue where the walls are saying leave now, leave. Nothing loved wants you to die for it. The castle lives in us in the way all fallen things live in the people who touch them right. Sometimes the wind at night hits the side of the comms tower just wrong and it harmonizes with a tension no one intended, and I watch Rowan look up instinctually. You can't stop hope from that, and then he looks at me instead. He says, "Do you hear it?" and I say, "Yeah." And we don't go out. We let the sound come to us. We write it down in the notebook next to the inventory of fuses and O-rings, and we pour tea we don't deserve, and we survive each other in the only way that works, audibly.